Listening. Listening is the most important communication skill. We probably spend more time using our listening skills than any other kind of skill. Like other skills, listening takes practice. Real listening is an active process and it requires a lot of attention. Now, there are different types of listenings. Effective listening. Effective listening is the process of analyzing sound, organizing them into recognizable patterns, interpreting the patterns, and understanding the message by inferring the meaning. Many of the problems we experience with people in our daily lives are primarily attributable to ineffective listening or lack of listening. So, like effective listening also can be referred for an example like listening to a lecture and like understanding the lecture which your faculty or the teacher tells to you is effective listening. And here are some pictures which refers to the effective listening. Now, listening comes first. The first and the foremost communication skill that we learn in our lives is nothing but listening. Listening is the first communication skill. As we can see in the given flowchart, there is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The first skill for communication is listening, and we could see here is the flowchart. And now, listening is not hearing. According to Almost College Learning Center, listening is and hearing are not the same. Hearing is the first stage of listening. Hearing occurs when our ears pick up sound waves which are the transported to our brain. This is our sense of hearing. Listening is communication process and to be successful is an active process. In other words, we must be an active participant in this communication process. An active listening, meaning, and evaluation of a message must take place before a listener can respond to a speaker. Therefore, listener is actively working while the speaker is talking. How can this happen? It is simple. Our thought speed is much faster than our speech speed. But be careful. Don't allow the thought speed to race into daydreaming. This habit will defeat our attempt to become an active listener. Now, basic communication skill profiles. Now, see, as we can see here, there is a table of a basic communication skill profile in which the first priority, like we could see the communication, order learned, extent used, extent taught. Listening is the first priority in order learned, extent used, and it's the fourth priority in extent taught. As we can see, the other communication skills like speaking is second priority in order learnt and extent used in second and extent taught third. Reading is the third priority in order learnt, extent used third, extent taught second. Writing. In order learnt, writing is fourth priority, extent used its fourth priority, and extent taught, writing is the first priority. As we can see in this table. Fallacies about listening. Listening is not my problem. Listening and hearing are the same. Good readers are good listeners. Smart people are better listeners. Listening improves with age. Listening skills are difficult to learn. These are the some false statements about listening. Objectives of listening: to learn, to increase one's understanding, to advise or counsel, to relieve one boredom. And it's also referred to an example like listening to music. Research findings: one quarter of our walking time is spent in listening. As we can see in the research finds, researchers show that at workplace, on an average, personnel spend about 32.7% of their time listening, 25.8% of their time speaking, 22.6% of their time writing. Effective listening is the most crucial skill for becoming a successful manager. It requires paying attention, interpreting, remembering sound, stimuli. Importance of listening. Communication is not complete without effective listening. An attentive listener stimulates better speaking by the speaker. A good listener learns more than an indifferent listener. A good listener can restructure vague speaking in a way that produces clearer meaning. A good listener learns to detect prejudices, assumptions, and attitudes. Real listening. Real listening has three basic steps. Hearing. Hearing just means to listening enough to catch what speaker is saying. For example, say you are listening to a report on zebras and the speaker mentioned that no two are alike. If you can repeat that fact, then you heard what has been said. Now, here comes the second basic step of listening. It's understanding. The next part of listening happens when you take what you heard and understanding it in your own way. Let's go back to the report on zebras. When you hear that no two are alike, think about what that might mean. You might think maybe this means that the patterns of stripes is different for each zebra. Now, here is the third part of listening: judging. After you are sure that you have understood what speaker has said, think about whether it makes sense. Do you believe what you have heard? You might think, how could the stripes be different from every zebra? But then again, the fingerprints are different for every person. I think it seems believable. Active listening process. Steps: hearing, filtering the information or removing the excess unwanted information in the statement, comprehending, remembering, responding. So now there are five steps as we can see here, and the first one is hearing, and you can see the rest as I have repeated. Now let's go to the first step of an active listener: hearing. Hearing is the first essential step in the listening process and relates to the sensory precipitation of sound. The listener further processes the perceived sound for learning to be effective. Hearing needs to be done with attentiveness and concentration. The next step involves sensing and filtering. of heard sounds. The heard message is categorized as wanted or unwanted. The unwanted message is discarded. The sense of judgment of individual comes into play. That is, the filtering process is subjective and the person chosen to retain what makes sense to him. Comprehending. The listener understands what the speaker has tried to convey. This actively can be described as absorbing, grasping, or assimilating. The listener uses his knowledge, experience, perception, and cognitive power. And the other step is remembering. Remember, the assimilated message is stored in a memory to facilitate future recall. Respond. Responding to a message takes place at the end of communication, immediately after or late, to show that the message is being received or comprehended. Now, types of listening. Discriminative listening. It involves identifying the difference between various sounds. It also enables one to differentiate between familiar and unfamiliar languages. Comprehension listening. It involves attaching meaning to what is being listened to. It may also include comprehending the non-verbal message being conveyed by the speaker. Evaluate listening. It involves evaluating and analyzing the message being received. It involves judging the acceptability of what is said depending on how logical one finds it to be. Now, the other types of listening are attentive listening. It involves paying attention to the words that are being spoken. Pretense listening. It involves more hearing than listening. It means pretending through facial expressions that one is listening when actually one is not. Selective listening. It involves selecting the desired part of the message and ignoring the undesired part of the message. Initiative listening. It means listening through the initiative mind by silencing the other forms of internal dialogues going on simultaneously. Barriers of effective listening. Physical barriers. People, relatable barriers, psychological barriers. Psychological barriers. Noise. Like some of the physical barriers are given as follows below. Like first one is noise, and second one is poor acoustics, and the third one is defective mechanical devices, frequent interruptions, uncomfortable seating arrangement, uncomfortable environment, message overloaded. Message overloaded. I'm really sorry. Psychological barriers. State of health. State of health of the listener and the speaker affects the listening ability. Fever, pain, or any other form of bodily discomfort makes it difficult for a person to listen or speak comfortably. Disability. Hearing deficiencies may lead to poor listening. Similarly, speech disorders or the speaker may make a speech incoherent to the listener. Speaker's accent may also make it difficult to listener to comprehend. Wandering attention. Human mind can process words at the rate about 500 per minute, whereas speaker speaks at the rate of 150 per minute. The difference between the two leaves that the listener with sufficient time to let his mind wander. And the other psychological barriers are being unsure of speaker's ability based on past experience or inputs from sources. The listener may have a preconceived notation of the speaker's ability. He may perceive the speaker to not be well informed or to lacking in depth and ability. Hence, the listener will not listen to what the speaker has to say. Personal anxiety. Sometimes the listener is preoccupied with personal concerns and anxieties. This makes it difficult to perceive what is being said by the speaker. Attitude. The listener may be high egocentric with know it all attitude or may not listen as he feels that he already knows what the listener has to say. Psychological barriers. Impatience. The listener may not have patience to wait for the other person to finish what he has to say. He may be intolerant or may be eager to add his own points to the discussion. As a result, his desire speak overcomes his desire to listen, thus actually as a barrier. Emotional blocks. Our deep-seated beliefs in the certain ideas may make it difficult for us to listen ideas which go against our belief. We may not hear such an idea wrongly, or it may get distorted in our mind to match our perception, or we may completely block it off by not listening to it. Many of the time, we block something off completely because of painful memories associated with it. Tips for being a good listener. Give your full attention on the person who is speaking. Don't look out of the window or at what else is going in the room. Make sure your mind is focused. It can be easily to let your mind wander if you think you know what happens the person is going to say next. But you might be wrong. If you feel your mind wandering, change the position of your body and try to concentrate on the speaker's words. Let the speaker finish before you begin to talk. Speakers appreciate having the chance to say everything they would like to say without being interrupted. When you are interrupted, looks like you aren't listening, even if you are really are. Tips for being a good listener. Let yourself finish listening before to speak, before beginning to speak. Listen for main ideas. The main ideas are the more important points the speaker wants to get across. They may be mentioned at the start or end of the talk and repeated a number of many times. Pay special attention to statements that begin with phrases such as my point is or the thing to remember is, etc. Ask questions. If you are not sure you understand what the speaker has said, just ask. For an example, you might say, when did you say that no two zebras are alike? Did you mean that the stripes are different on each other? Tips for being a good listener. Give a feedback. Sit up straight, look directly at the speaker now and then, nod to show that you understand. At appropriate points, you may also smile, laugh, or be silent. These are always to let the speaker know that you are listening. Remember, you listen with your face as well as your ears. Thank you.